A very happy new year. Welcome to 2020. Welcome to another year of Dan Really Likes Wine. Welcome to January, where by my calculation, about a week or so into the new year, you should have already stopped going to the gym. The plan to be a vegan has gone out the water. You are no longer attempting to save organic dolphins in the Amazon rainforest. And basically you're going back to the life you had in 2019 with all of those daft New Year's resolutions ebbing away extremely quickly. So before it's too late, I thought I'd help you with some New Year's resolutions that you can actually keep. Keeping New Year's resolutions is not something I've ever been terribly good at, but these are ones that I hope to be able to stick to through the course of 2020. If you read the Dan Really Likes Wine column on Food 24, the first one of 2020, I spoke about some New Year's resolutions, and these play out to them with a couple of modifications. Basically what I suggested for 2020 was to look for some new wine regions, go to an area that you haven't been to before in terms of what you drink. If you normally just drink Stellenbosch wines, maybe try something from the Hemelade Valley or from Elgin. Try a new estate you haven't heard of, find somewhere new, find somewhere different, somewhere a little smaller, off the beaten track. Go and do some exploring yourself, go and visit these places as well as just drinking the wine from them, and share your wine experiences with all of your friends. And then also to try out some different varietals, stuff you might normally drink. If you only ever drink Sauvignon Blanc, maybe give Semillon a go, for instance. If you only ever drink Cabernet Sauvignon, try Cabernet Franc for something that's not massively dissimilar, but just broadens your wine experience a little. So those are my suggestions in the column. These are things that I think I need to do myself during the course of 2020. I've got some broader aims. I want to go and visit some more winemaking countries, see a little bit more of the winemaking world, broaden my horizons there. And I want to visit some of the wine estates in South Africa that I haven't been to, and there are still plenty of them. We've got many, many, many wonderful wineries across the country. But I'd also like to do a few things that these four wines will point me in the right direction of. And the first of them relates to this. Now, if you watch Dan Really Likes Wine often enough, you'll know I don't always give Sauvignon Blanc the greatest rap. And it's not because I dislike Sauvignon Blanc, it's just always been an attempt to push people into drinking some other white wine. A lot of guys just drink Sauvignon Blanc and don't give something like Chenin Blanc a chance, or even go into some of the lesser known white varietals, wines that we don't see quite so much of, something like an Albarino. So what I've decided to do in 2019 is to complement the many other wines that I drink with a little more Sauvignon Blanc, because we do make some excellent Sauvignon Blanc in South Africa. Now, Sauvignon Blanc's biggest downfall is that it can be incredibly acidic, just big raw green notes. If you take somebody like the Joburg foodie, Johannesburg's biggest food Instagrammer, you'll find somebody who is not a Sauvignon Blanc fan, but there is some really nice Sauvignon Blanc being made. What this Sauvignon Blanc does as well, though, is speaks to my desire to go and explore some new wine areas. And this comes from Outeniqua, wine of origin Outeniqua. Very unusual, there's not much wine from it. And this is out of the guys from Krans. Now, you might remember last year we had Butz from Krans on the show talking about his Cape Vintage wines, the port-style wine, and what magnificent wines they are. But it's not just those lovely, deep, rich, sweet dessert-style wines that they make. There's some other wine, and this, under the Garden Route label, which is some pretty fun marketing, is their Sauvignon Blanc. It's a simple Sauvignon Blanc, it's about 70 rand a bottle, so it's a nice way to start the year price-wise. And it's also a nice wine to have at this time of year, where it in amongst the rain, and it's been a fairly wet summer for a lot of South Africa, and a nice hot day, Sauvignon Blanc is a go-to. And straight away you get those green notes, sort of green pepperish, bit of fresh apple, very, very strong bouquet. So this is a 2018, which means it's now 2 years old, because we've just started 2020. Birthdays, much like in, I think it's Korea, where on the 1st of January everybody turns a year older, which means trying to have your birthday party must be a nightmare if you live in Seoul. So once we get to the 1st of January, wine becomes a year older in terms of our general understanding. So in the space of 24 hours, I have an extra year of vintage to my Sauvignon Blanc. Fresh, zesty, maybe a little bit more acid than I would find absolutely ideal. but otherwise a good start to my 2020 Sauvignon Blanc crusade. It's not going to be my go-to grape for the year, but I will try and drink a little more of it and appreciate a little more of it. And 70 rand, that's really good value for a very pleasant bottle of Sauvignon Blanc from Outeniqua, somewhere else I need to visit this year. I mentioned a moment ago trying varietals that you don't normally drink, maybe you've never had before. This might be one of them because we don't see a huge amount of Riesling in South Africa. I was reminded of Riesling last year by David Higgs, who got back from a high-speed cycling trip in Europe. He'd taken some time off from Marble and Saint to go and indulge in his passion on two wheels and indulge in some food and wine. He spent some time in Germany, and he would not shut up about German Rieslings, to the extent that I've promised to go and visit Germany with him just to drink Riesling. And the Riesling that he spoke of was quite magnificent. Now, the cool regions in which Riesling is made in Germany are echoed by Elgin and Paul Cluver, which, if you've driven out along the N2 out of Cape Town, heading up to Hermanus and beyond up to the Garden Route, you will have gone past on the left. Paul Cluver, almost as famous for their mountain bike trails now as they are for their wine. They're besotted with mountain biking. They've done a lot for the mountain biking industry, often there on the Absa Cape Epic. Paul Cluver also make plenty of fruit, and often in their white wines, and particularly when I've had their Riesling in the past, you've got those fresh crunchy apples, which Elgin is also so well known for in that particular Riesling. So I'm going to try some of it. It's a wine that I don't drink a lot of, and again, as I say, they don't make a huge amount of it in South Africa, but it's worth looking out for it because it just adds a different dimension to your white wine drinking experience. Already a lot crisper on the nose. Also apples, but sort of tartar apples. You know those apples you bite into and you, whoa, but then you want to have another bite because it's got that sort of bittersweet yumminess to it. I'm not sure if that counts as umami, but you know what I mean. The Riesling I've had in the past has often been in Europe. I've had a lot in Switzerland. The Swiss make some pretty good white wine, and Riesling with a cheese fondue is a good combination, especially in winter. I could drink this in winter as well, cold Johannesburg winter. If you're not a red wine drinker and you want a white wine for winter, I think this could do the trick. But it also could work really nicely for summer. It's taut, it's crisp, it's fresh, and those tart apples just running through it. Oh, real Elgin champion. Lovely South African Riesling. So if you like your white wine, you want to try something a little different, well, there's your go-to for 2020. Then, sticking with the theory of new grapes, this is one you might never have heard of before, let alone actually drunk. Nero d'Avola. This is the Bosman family vineyards. The Bosmans have had this for thousands of years. It's generation after generation after generation. The making of wine is very much in the blood and the genes of this particular family. And Petrus from the Bosman family, on the advice of some experts, decided to go over to the Mediterranean and to check out this grape, which is Sicilian. So it's made in really dry Mediterranean climates, and given that the Cape is under increasing pressure with water, with rising temperatures, the Mediterranean grapes I think we're going to see more of. And this one's now been going for a little while down in Wellington. It's a really fun region to visit. I love going through Wellington. Avoid Skalkberger's farm unless you've got 4 days to recover from a wine tasting with him. Everybody else, 1 day should suffice. And the Bosmans are always really welcoming. Corlea Fure makes some beautiful wine, and I've had a lot of fun trying to break into their cellar because they've got some great vintages and they always kick me out. But their Nero d'Avola is something that for me shows how our winemakers understand not just their terroir but also the conditions, the winemaking world in which we are living, and the fact that they have needed to make some changes. So they've added a really drought-resistant, hardier grape that is, it's kind of got that lighter Shiraz feel to it, often that newer world Shiraz when made. So this is 2014, it's got now 6 years on it, and it comes out of Wellington. If you haven't been out to Wellington, the Wellington Wine Route is a delight, and Bosman in particular is a load of fun to visit with some pretty good wine. Now already, if you look at that colour, it's got a beautiful rustiness to it. Just at first glance you could be forgiven for thinking this was a lot older than it is. That's not so much the vintage as it is the nature of the grape, and that's just a lovely colour. Oh, glorious. And that is a very pleasant Italian finding a new home in South Africa. Not as loud and as noisy as a Mediterranean might often be. It's quite a restrained wine, that. And that colour leads to a real dryness to that wine. It's not terribly fruity. It's got lovely balance to it. And it is eminently drinkable. Normally I think they only make this for members of the wine club, so the Bosman Wine Club might be one you want to sign up for, but I'm sure if you visit the estate they will give you the chance to try it out. But it's another broader space to have a look out for in 2020. Who is making a slightly different type of wine with a grape that maybe doesn't have a history in South Africa? There are a couple of estates, Jordan being one, Ibn Sadi another, bringing in some of the Greek grapes, Assyrtiko, making wines from grapes from Greece because they are used to the kind of conditions we're seeing more of in the Cape. This is another example here from Bosman. It is a lovely wine, but it also speaks, I think, to part of the future of winemaking in the Cape. And then finally to one more resolution that is for me in particular. Now, again, referencing that column on Food 24, I spoke about how I want people to find some of the smaller, newer, more different wine estates, the wineries, some of the garagistes, people you haven't heard of before, because there are so many out there who are making some terrific wine in small batches and minimal volumes that are worth celebrating and having a go at. I certainly encourage you to do that. But I get to drink a lot of wine, I get to explore a lot of new wine, a lot of wine arrives in my cellar from around South Africa and beyond. And when you do that, you sometimes forget some of the bigger and more established names. And for the wine snobs, there's often a, oh no, that's a very commercial winery, I'm not going to try that, I'm going to go and drink some organic garagiste wine made in a bathtub out of Tulbach. I don't want to drink something that's made 15 million bottles ago. And that does a disservice to the quality of many, if not all, of those bigger estates who've got people who are equally passionate about making wine and who are that big and that successful because, for the most part, they've had many, many years building up a business, building up the wine expertise and building up some terrific brands. And I think Nederburg's a really good example of that. I got the chance to do a little bit of work with the Nederburg team last year in terms of understanding their older wine, but also understanding their wine at the higher end. And there really is some lovely, lovely stuff. They're 2 centuries Cabernet Sauvignon. I gave a bottle to Gary Megan, the Australia MasterChef judge. He drank it, reckoned it was one of the best bottles he'd had last year. And that's pretty high praise from a man who doesn't just make a lot of food, but he drinks a reasonable amount of wine as well. What I've got here is one of their bottles of late harvest, their private bin Edelkeur. Initially this was a wine that would only have been made for the Nederburg wine auction. That's now been rebranded as the Fine and Rare Wine Auction with great success, and it's a space that has for so many years celebrated the very best of South African wine and been one of our key wine events. And they've got a second edition coming up later on this year, one for the calendar if you can make it down. But not just this being Nederburg, but also dessert wine also speaks to the space of the sweeter wines that I don't think we give enough tribute to, enough time to in South Africa. So try during the course of 2020 to work a little bit of dessert wine into your tastings. Bring out a bottle after dinner with some cheese. You'll often get a slightly raised eyebrow from people who wouldn't normally drink dessert wine, and you'll frequently find yourself scrambling for a second bottle once they discover just how nice this is. So this is a 2012, so it's had 8 years on it. It's 100% Chenin Blanc, and now becomes a noble late harvest under that Edelkeur name. That just looks lovely. And for me, the secret of a great dessert wine is that, yes, it's sweet, it's got that honey to it, but it's not overly so. It's not sickly sweet. It's not, I've just had 7 bags of Jelly Babies and I probably should have left the last 6. It doesn't make you feel like if you drink 2 glasses you're going to get diabetes. The sweetness is there certainly, but then it goes and it leaves a beautifully smooth and rounded finish. And that, for me, is the reason why we make such great dessert wine and why we should be celebrating it more. So add that to your list of things to do in 2020. Finishing off meals with friends with a bottle of dessert wine. They're not huge. Between a group of you can quite easily get through half a bottle or more. Save it for the next night or two. If you haven't finished it, it'll certainly keep. And this 2012 is just drinking delightfully, and it's another tribute to the Nederburg brand, which, if you're a wine snob, and I I've been accused of that on many occasions. Try some Nederburg in 2020, especially some of the higher end stuff, some of the ingenuity, the Mediterranean blends, that 2nd century, the private bins, Shiraz and Cabs. I think you might be pleasantly surprised. But whatever you do in 2020, make it a year of adventure, make it a year of exploring. Go and find a new wine estate, go and share a new bottle with new friends. If you're heading overseas, take some South African wine with you, show people abroad just why what we do, what we make is so brilliant. 2019, I think, was a good year for South African wine. We made some terrific wine, we made some big steps forward in the wine world, but there is still so much potential to be raised, and if we all do that little bit more to explore, to share and to celebrate, we'll take that industry another big step forward. So have a wonderful wine drinking year in 2020, and if you're not already, make sure you join that Pick and Pay Wine Club. It's absolutely free. You'll introduce yourself to some terrific new wines at some great prices and broaden those wine horizons in 2020. Cheers.